Welcome to the Keto Geek Podcast. Let's do this.
Health, nutrition, fitness, low-carb lifestyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Keto Geek Podcast. My name is Fahad, and I am the host of this show. Guys and gals, we have so much going on right now, myself included. I am working 12 to 18 hours per day, just doing either production, fulfillment, creating content, lots of stuff. That's what you get when you have a startup company, I suppose, but we enjoy it, you know? It's that daily grind and challenge and facing failure and then accomplishing that roller coaster. I could say I'm kind of addicted to this sort of endeavor, which is Keto Geek. And it's really awesome to see you guys and gals becoming healthier and happier. And some of the stories that we get to hear are just amazing, especially when you guys listen to our podcast and tell us, hey, thank you so much for spreading the knowledge out there. So it means a lot. But yes, we are currently... we're actually working towards launching a new product in the middle of May. It will be a high-fat, high-protein product, kind of like a sister to our coffee protein energy pod, but with salted chocolate in there instead. We don't have a finalized launch date yet, so hold on to your horses, and I will continue to announce as we get closer to May about our products. I'm also going to be flying to Hungary to Paleomedicina. By the time this podcast comes out, I will be flying up in the air and learning from the cool people in Hungary, that is the Paleomedicina folks, and see what they have to offer as far as knowledge is concerned. They're onto something really awesome as far as fighting chronic conditions is concerned. They're using a high meat fat based approach, which is ridiculously unique. And just to add a little bit of a prelude to this podcast, when I started the whole keto journey, I was told, hey, eat some goddamn real food. And at that time, I took it for face value. What can go wrong with real food? I mean, everything is great, right? It's natural, it's fresh from the ground or above the ground or whatever it is. But after this whole parade of this carnivorous movement, I have started to draw some skepticism to some of the real food that is out there. So one good example would be fruits, which have been bred in the last few hundred years to become fructose bombs. In fact, you go to Jamba Juice and you're thinking, oh, look at this healthy, delicious smoothie that I can have with a bunch of fruit. Well, it has a lot of fructose in there, which can be potentially damaging to your liver because of how it is metabolized. And then you walk into the green vegetable aisles where you have leafy greens, which too have quite a bit of toxins in them. And now I'm at this point where I am going to start pointing some fingers towards some of these foods and their claims that come with it. And I'm starting to notice that a lot of these claims that come with foods for certain chemicals inside those foods are dose dependent, meaning that you have to eat a boatload of those foods in order to get any sort of benefits. Oh, and guess what you're doing? You're also concentrating those toxins while you're at it by increasing the dosage of the actual food. So I think I'm going to finally start drawing some skepticism. And I think that's a good attitude to have, is to draw some skepticism and not to take things at face value right away. And I understand we live in an information age where we are all short on time and everybody's got 60 to 80 hours to work, but, you know, health is priceless. You can trade health with experiences, but if you choose bad experiences, your health is going to get compromised. So focus on it. Focus on good health. And speaking of health, nutrition, and carnivory, one of the topics that I really wanted to cover in our podcast was the philosophy of suffering. So that is something we haven't dealt with because, well, we never had the chance to talk about it. And when I was going on Twitter through our Keto Geek account, I started noticing this Twitter handle called @SteakAndIron, who was giving these really smart and smart-ass comments on various different people's tweets and responding to them. And considering how our podcast is less concerned about, hey, this person has 100,000 followers or any of that kind of stuff, we're more focused on what the person has to add to our lives. So I went into this underground mode and decided to have @SteakAndIron, the guy behind it, show up to our show and have a conversation with him. He sounded like a pretty brutally honest guy who was ridiculously smart and isn't afraid to engage with other people. And his name is actually Daniel Wiseman. And who exactly is he? Daniel is a 32-year-old engineer in our Bay Area or Northern California. He's employed in the technical sales world, and he used to take his health for granted, but he became fat, sick, and constantly in pain and decided to change his health by taking his health in his own hands. And personally, based on my observation, he has this cutthroat, honest approach and these snarky comments that I really enjoy. And so I guess this is one great benefit of being a fully self-sponsored podcast, that we can bring in anyone who we like, even if they go against the grain. It allows us to experiment, and I think I'm just rambling now. So without further ado, I think we might have caught our first living Bitcoin carnivore. Anyway, without further ado, I bring to you our podcast with Daniel Wiseman. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Daniel Wiseman, or more commonly known as SteakAndIron on Twitter on here. Daniel, your Twitter feed is hilarious. How did it begin?
It was kind of an accident. I had people recommend, I'll get on Twitter, you can talk to people, famous people and authors and, and visionaries and stuff like that. And it's kind of a direct way to talk to people that, you wouldn't actually be able to interact with on a regular basis. So I just kind of started a Twitter account some years ago, actually. And it was pretty, inactive for a good long while. And I just kind of picked the name SteakAndIron. It wasn't taken. It would kind of basically fit my lifestyle. But I noticed as kind of time went on, I became a target, maybe just because of my irreverence and my name itself. Like, people were like, oh, this guy, let me go ahead and start, attack him a little bit. And, with the pushback, people started to like the way I interacted with people. And then I was like, okay, this is something people enjoy. I'll keep on having fun with this.
So do you think Twitter has been somewhat of an advantage in certain cases compared to other social media? I noticed that in our Instagram, it's never going to be it's not usually a two-way exchange or a multiple battle festival that goes on in Twitter. So have you pondered or tried other medias as well? Or is this just your strengths, or what have you observed here?
I like Twitter, just as a medium. It's a good way for people from all over the world and different kind of fame levels and statuses to just sort of be able to interact or not. It's easy to block people and get rid of voices you don't want to hear. But it also is fairly low maintenance. Like, if you have an Instagram feed, you kind of have to curate it a little bit more. If you have a Facebook page, you kind of have to, make sure that the people on it aren't trolls or, trying to sell things or whatever. Twitter is kind of it's bare bones. It's minimalist. And I think that's what really appeals to me. There's very few layers of garbage between me and the people I want to talk to or the people that want to talk to me.
Okay, normally I ask people, where do you go for research? I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, which is, how do you pick your targets, and who do you follow, and how do you decide who to follow?
Let's dial it back. I do not have targets. I have never targeted anyone. I don't do that. People target me expecting me to be a pushover, and I'm not. And I will fight back because, like I said, I've got the name SteakAndIron, and I am an advocate of carnivory. And I think that veganism is based on the furthest things from science, and that a lot of the dietary advice and the vegan propaganda is simply religious fervor. And I have no problem telling people that, and people don't want to hear that. So that's where the exchanges and the hilarity all comes from, is somebody going, "You're wrong," and so, "No, you're wrong, and here's all the data to back it up. You're an idiot." Now, the people I follow are, I like people. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a fitness instructor. I'm not a model. I'm not a personal trainer. I'm not a power lifter. I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm just some guy. And I leave that kind of research to the people who want to make a lifestyle out of that. I don't have an interest in doing that. I just want to learn about it. So people like, I'm a huge fan of Dave Feldman, obviously Sean Baker, Siobhan Huggins, or Higgins. I hope I didn't mess up her name. She's great. But these people who make a passion of kind of digging through these huge piles of data, especially when we're talking about studies that have sort of been swept under the rug, and say, well, let's look at what does it actually say about meat? What does it actually say about vegetables? Let's get that information out there. Those people to me are heroes. And anybody who's doing that kind of research, I want to follow them. I want to learn from them, and I want to promote them in every way that I can as just, a regular guy.
Sounds fantastic. And I think we should backtrack a little bit even further and talk about your stories. Like, how did you get into this sort of lifestyle?
Yeah, sure. So I guess it would have been about 2008-ish. I found myself well, actually, I'll go back even further than that. In 2003, I graduated high school, and I went to college and moved out, and I was on my own, and I was working. I decided I wanted to work through college, learn sort of time management, money management, pay my way, that sort of independence that comes with that. I decided that's the route I wanted to take. But I live in the Bay Area, which is, by some accounts, the most expensive place in the world. And after rent and expenses and everything was all paid for, there wasn't really a whole lot left over for food. So, I basically ate whatever I could. And that amounted to, the cheapest garbage I could get my hands on. I actually had an arrangement with the person that owned the local Starbucks. They throw away these breakfast sandwiches. They were like Egg McMuffins, but they were Starbucks Egg McMuffins. They throw them away at the end of the day, and I would take them, and that's what I'd eat. And I would there was a period of time where Safeway had cake mix for super cheap, and I bought a bunch of cake mix, and I lived on cake mix for like a week. And, I survived. It taught me a lot about, mental fortitude and just sort of making do. And I know that if anything really hits the fan, I'm going to be okay because I know how to survive. But, I got through college with this focus on survive, get the degree, build your mind, and your physical body is this thing that sort of takes a back seat. And that brings me to basically when I graduated and got my first real job, and I found myself, only working, not going to school at the same time, with a little bit of expendable income and, a little bit of personal freedom at that point, that I'd be able to make these sort of decisions that would affect my health. And, with a body that was already deteriorating. I'm in my mid-20s at this point. I've got no energy. I've got no libido. I've got no drive. I've got, I've got what I feel is the body of an old man. So I said, okay, I need to get in shape. What does that even mean? What is a protein? What is a fat? What is a carbohydrate? I had no concept of these things. And so I started researching online. It's like, okay, well, I don't have a ton of money, but it looks like, this whole, vegans are healthy, right? So I'll try veganism, and I tried veganism for a little bit. It was mainly like the beans and rice and, sort of kind of veganism, a lot of bread, a lot of, starches and stuff. And then, I actually didn't lose any weight from that. I didn't feel very well. I had an upset stomach the whole time. And, I started learning about barbell training and the sort of advice that goes with that. And I looked at like, okay, you're an adult male. You should be eating like, by some people's advice, 100 to 200 grams of protein a day, whoever you end up talking to. It's like, okay, well, how much am I actually eating? So I'd go back and I'd measure it. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm eating like 30 grams of protein a day. That doesn't sound like much at all. If I'm eating nothing but oranges, beans, and rice, it's like, maybe this vegan thing really isn't working out for me. So I got involved in, I think it's still around, bodybuilding.com. They had a very large forum of people doing different workouts and different kinds of dietary things. And I stumbled across this sub-board on nutrition called Keto. I'm like, I don't know, what is Keto? I don't know about Keto. And it sounded like the Atkins diet. I'm like, okay, I remember this whole Atkins thing where people ate like a bunch of meat and bacon and eggs and stuff, and they lost a bunch of weight. But then I'm also reading these things about people, they're losing not just a bunch of weight, they're losing like 100 pounds, and they have energy. And I'm remembering every time I tried to cut calories, I had no energy. I was tired. I was, beyond just like tired, like sleepy, but just like lethargic. I could be wide awake, but completely unwilling to get off the couch. And I was like, okay, this is a little bit weird. Now, bacon and eggs, I like these things. I like meat. I like whatever. Let's give it a shot. And I was kind of at the point in my life where like, okay, this is probably going to give me a heart attack, but maybe I lose some weight and leave a pretty corpse. That's sort of where my mindset was at this point. Like, I don't really care. I just want to look nice. I want to feel better. And even if it shaves, years off my life, I don't really care. So I did. I tried it, and I did a lot of this sort of like garbage keto, the junk food keto, a lot of like cheesecakes, sugar-free cheesecakes, a lot of artificial sweeteners and that kind of stuff. But for a good long while, it actually worked. I lost pretty quickly, like 20 pounds. And, I wasn't eating the pound coffee all the time. And I was a big fan of like Monster energy drinks and stuff. And actually, I was drinking about probably about a quart a day for a while back in college, because I could only get maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. And I ended up writing a letter to one of the energy drink companies, thanking them for my grades one semester, and they ended up sending me a pallet. They sent me a 24-pack of the cans, which is like, to me, that'd be like, sending, Smirnoff vodka as the number one customer, big thing of alcohol or whatever. But it was not good for my health. But, they sent it to me. So I drank a lot of that stuff, but I realized I didn't need them anymore. And so I cut them out. I have like maybe a cup of coffee in the morning. That was it. And I think probably the most amazing thing from it was, if we go back a little bit, when I was unhealthy, especially when I was in college, I was falling asleep at the wheel while driving. And that happened more than once. And I look back on it, and it's like, at the time, it didn't seem like a big deal. But, I think maybe as I got more mature, or maybe, who knows, maybe it's the whole keto thing, with the mental sharpness and being able to review things better. But I don't know. I look back at it and go, I could have died. I could have killed somebody. I could have driven off the road, into a woman pushing her baby in a stroller, killed everybody on there, then wrapped my car around a pole. There is absolutely no reason that didn't happen aside from pure dumb luck. Yeah. And I noticed that wasn't the case. And we're talking like 3 p.m. after a full night's sleep, and I still have that level of fatigue. So I realized that wasn't with me anymore. And I noticed I was able to focus on my job more. And I was able to, after work, come home and actually do things, clean, my apartment and cook and, wash the dishes and these kind of things. Like, I didn't just let things pile up. I had that amount of energy just to get through everyday life. Mm-hmm. And that blew my mind. Like, yeah. I just thought this is just how I am. I'm just one of these people that I've got chronic fatigue syndrome or whatever. You Google these things and it says, oh, you have whatever condition. And I go, okay, that's just the way I am. Those are the shackles on my wrists. That's just how it is. And I just is like, wait a minute, there actually is a solution to it. It's not drugs. It's not, a doctor. It's just eating a lot of meat and at the time, a lot of vegetables and a lot of fat and a lot of cheese and all this other kind of stuff. That's all it is. That's the magic bullet. Oh my God. I found the truth. I found the way.
Yeah. And I think you do. Yeah. So I think you just took it to, are you like a carnivore right now? Practically? I'm practically a carnivore, and I go through long stints of carnivore mainly just for like convenience. So let me move it forward a little bit. So I did a lot of the junk food keto, and then I went to I was like, okay, I came to a conclusion. I can't remember if I came up with the saying or if I actually heard it from somebody or if it just popped up in a conversation or whatever. But I was like, I don't think a cake is healthy, even if you make it out of almond flour and stevia. Like, that's not a health food. I don't think a cheesecake is a health food just because you didn't put any sugar in it. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. These are treats. So I went to more of a plant-based kind of, I guess like Jimmy Moore style of high-fat, low-carb thing, a lot of plants, and a lot of like coconut oil. And I do like in the morning, I did like a green smoothie with like a big thing of kale and lettuce and broccoli and stuff all blended up in it. And I noticed I get like these upset stomachs all the time. I don't know what the cause of it was, but then I stopped doing that and my upset stomach went away. And around this time, I was like, wait a minute, I'm eating less vegetables and feeling better. I kind of stumbled across this whole
carnivore thing. And I heard about, like, on Reddit, there's this zero carb community, and I would always kind of dismiss it. Like, these are just whiny people who don't want to eat their vegetables because they're picky little children or whatever. Just shut up, sit down, and eat your vegetables. There's literally like 300 different vegetables you can eat. You haven't tried them all. You don't know if you'd like them or not. Just grow up. But then I cut them out, and I saw, wait a minute, I feel better. And, my back feels better, and my joints feel better, and I'm recovering even better from exercise than I used to. Wait a minute. And then, like, so the Sean Baker came along, and he said, I'm going to do this whole, like, eat nothing but steak for a month, and I'm going to eat nothing but steak for a year. And I was like, holy crap, there's kind of something to this, isn't there? And that led me down the road of, like, okay, this whole notion of vegetables in the first place, they don't have any calories in them. So, I mean, in times of famine, people would not value them, right? I mean, like, I don't want to sit around and eat 40 pounds of leaves to get, enough protein to, you'll get sick from that. You'll never even be able to fit that much food in your body. So where did this whole notion of vegetables being healthy came from? And I just sort of looked into it. And I mean, the best studies are like, if you isolate one chemical from one plant and put it in a petri dish with some, rat cells, the cells survive longer, or it kills a couple of cancer cells, or but you translate it into human studies and it doesn't add up. It's like, there is no real good evidence that if you take an unhealthy person and throw a bunch of plants at them, fruits, vegetables, whatever, that they get better. It seemed very clear to me. Once I really started to look at the studies, it's more about removing these things that are causing harm to your system. Obviously grains, sugars, refined carbohydrates, vegetable oils, these things that are there. I mean, pretty much anybody, even a vegan, would say, like, a box of Oreos is probably not health food, right? Even though they're technically vegan. Once you remove those things from the diet, people tend to improve in their health. And then you look at the plants that we do eat, the extreme majority of vegetables are actually the same plant. They're all, brassica plants that are bred from special cultivars of Chinese mustard. You look at bok choy, you look at cabbage, you look at cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, broccoli. They're all the same plant. A lot of people don't even realize that because we happen to find a plant that didn't instantly kill you when you ate it. If you go into the woods and you grab a handful of something green and you eat it, you will get sick. Because plants just, they don't want to get eaten. They have toxins in them. And even the plants that we have bred to be less toxic, there's something like 65 different identifiable carcinogens in broccoli. They're just in very small amounts, but they're still in there. And you can't say that it has no effect on a human being. You can say most people will probably have very little issue with that. And I think that's a fair statement. But you can't say that there's a total actual net benefit by eating as much broccoli as you can when you're still following that up with, say, French fries and cheeseburgers. So what I do is I eat mostly meat, probably 90% meat. When I'm traveling for work, I will often go complete carnivore for the entire duration just because it's easier. I'll often do like an Amy burger, full raw carnivore, or Amber O'Hearn raw carnivore sort of thing. I'll just go to the store, literally buy a New York steak and take it back to my hotel room and eat it with my bare hands like a caveman because, I mean, whatever. I don't have time to like cook and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, even on my first experiment, I'm like, well, I'm probably going to get sick from this, but let's see what happens. And I didn't.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing. It's like, well, wait a minute. I was always told eating raw meat will make you sick, but I ate a bunch of raw vegetables. That made me sick. I ate a bunch of raw meat and I didn't.
Yeah. And
So,
just to add a little bit,
encourages-
just to add a little bit here, sorry to interrupt for a second, but this whole argument for the whole real food, eat all of these vegetables and fruits are good for you. We've been domesticating them for such a long time. Even your fruits are now fructose bombs nowadays, just to add that.
Oh yeah. If you think that an apple or a banana, you go to the store and you buy a Honeycrisp apple, if you think nature had anything to do with the production of that, you are an idiot. There is no way a bird would let a fruit that sweet and that succulent actually come to maturity. Nature would not allow that. That is idiotic. The apples that we eat now, they're fructose bombs. Bananas, they're actually so rare that we found basically a banana that was that delicious and we cloned it. Every banana in existence is genetically identical, which is why I guess they're dying out because they don't have any kind of genetic variation against disease.
Yeah.
These fruits and stuff that we found a few that don't poison us. They have some kind of nutritious value. We've bred them into something the human body is completely incapable of dealing with. They are candy, and they are not natural. And to argue, this is the natural diet of a human being is completely insane. I mean, even if those plants did exist in nature, they'd only exist for, anybody who's ever owned a fruit tree in their backyard knows that fruit's only ripe for a month, maybe. What do you do? I'm of Northern European heritage. And Northern Europeans Northern Europe has been populated by human beings for at least the last 40,000 years. What did my ancestors eat in winter?
Yeah.
Nothing. I mean, they just would have starved to death if they had to eat plants. And so for the very least, at least half the year, they would have had to eat nothing but meat. I mean, they didn't have refrigeration. I guess we need refrigeration, but preservation technology. They didn't have glass jars or anything like that. They hunted something, they killed it, they ate it for at least the extreme majority of their dietary intake, and found a few novel ways to supplement that when, say, there was a famine or the herds that they were following died out.
Yeah. So whenever I try to walk into the plant kingdom, I walk with a huge amount of caution in there. And that goes back to the same argument that you've made, is like, okay, I mean, everybody's telling me eat the spinach, eat that, but what about the oxalates and some of those things that are in there that could potentially cause harm to me? So it's a cocktail of many different things, and I think we just need to scratch it and start from the beginning on this matter.
Yeah, there's this health halo around vegetables that says, okay, it's natural. It grew out of the ground. What could possibly go wrong with it? I've got vegans getting fights with me like, oh my God, you're talking about toxins in vegetables? You're insane. I'm like, no. What about phytates? What about oxalates? What about phytoestrogens? What about lectins? What about terpenes? What about all these chemicals that exist in plants? And this isn't some conspiracy theory. I'm not making this up. You can go to a chemistry class and you can isolate these compounds from anything you get from Whole Foods. This is not nonsense. And if you take and you have some of this, you'll get sick. So why do we put this halo around plants which don't want to get eaten? These are defenses. Even caffeine. Caffeine is an insecticide. It just happens to have this, stimulant effect on human beings and other animals by sheer happenstance. That was not, a desired thing. But all the rest of these phytochemicals, most of them are defensive because a plant can't run away. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have animals. If you were to run into a field, as a naked caveman, you see a cow or a bull or whatever, and you punch it, what's going to happen? Right? It's going to fight back. It doesn't want to get eaten, of course. So you've got, bulls, they've got, mass. They're very large. They're very difficult animals to take down. Any type of oxen or whatever, the different kinds of cattle that roam Africa or whatever. They're big. They're strong. They've got horns. They've got very thick, tough skin. They've got, very big, heavy hooves. These are defensive weapons. But that's how they fight. If you can get past that, there really isn't anything in the meat that'll harm you. And we've got some very shaky science that people held up for the last 70 years that says, oh, well, they've got cholesterol, and cholesterol's bad for you. You've got saturated fat, and saturated fat's bad for you. And you've got, different kinds of, protein, animal proteins, in the mTOR pathway, yada, yada. These things are harmful to you. Yeah. And you look at it and you go, well, wait a minute, but, my body will actually manufacture saturated fat. A good amount of my body fat is saturated. My body manufactures cholesterol because every single cell in my body needs it.
Yeah.
Because, we're at the very least omnivores. You look at the studies and say, okay, if a rabbit, which never would eat animals, eats cholesterol, it gets sick. Well, it's like, okay, well, if I eat a bunch of grass, which human beings can't eat, I would get sick too. So it's completely irrelevant to human biology.
Yeah. And
so when we look at the science and we delve a little bit deeper, it's like, really, what is the danger of an animal? And I can't find a good study that actually indicates, and aside from there's some population studies, whatever, and that gives you a good indication. Let's start digging a little bit deeper. But if you look at the actual causative functions or the mechanism at which meat will cause harm to a human being, there is no science there. None. Nobody's ever shown a pathway by which eating saturated fat, cholesterol, animal meat in its natural state will actually cause harm to a human being. And I'm totally open to review any study that refutes that, but every time it's ever been shown to me, it was, nonsense. It was a population study, or, so we took a rat and we gave it cancer, and then we gave it heme iron isolated from meat that a rat would never eat. And as it turns out, if you do that, the cancer gets worse. It's like, well, that doesn't mean anything at all. That is the most irrelevant study you could ever produce. Tell me what it does to a human being, and I'll listen. And I'm hearing nothing but silence.
What I like about this steak only or a meat based diet is that now you can finally have studies which have one or two confounders. Okay, steak versus steak plus caffeine, steak versus steak plus salt. Now you can isolate certain ingredients or certain food items and really make a solid study about that. So that's something I really want to look forward to. Have you thought about it in this way?
I have. I've got a number of things I would like to do as experiments, self-experiments moving forward. I think I've pretty much seen how my body behaves on literally nothing but steak. And I'll be frank, I do drink a fair bit of coffee, so there is a caffeine as a confounding factor in there. But, I'm well known for my, taste in whiskey, which could also be a confounding factor in there too. But my body functions pretty well on that. But yeah, what happens if you do isolate these things? And then we're talking about real hard science. And science is pretty close to what you do in like a petri dish, but actually taking a human being. I mean, the idea that to most people eating literally one food and nothing else, and that's insane to a lot of people, but we've done it. A lot of, in the carnivore community, we said, okay, beef, that's what we eat, period, beef. Or, some people eat lamb, or some people eat just like pork. And we've done this, and it's like, okay, this establishes a baseline. What happens if we add something to that? I would love to see that. Maybe, who knows, in the coming year, I might make a self-experiment of that. But at least let's see what happens if I do nothing but beef and no caffeine. Do I feel it more caffeine withdrawals, less caffeine withdrawals than I normally would? Who knows? And nobody's ever going to fund that study, ever. That's never going to get funded. What possible reason could somebody throw, $50 million at a study to do that? It'll never happen. So that's why we need these citizen scientists and these individuals and these N equals one to say, okay, if somebody over there does something and it works for them or it doesn't work for them, that's not, relevant. But if I've got 10,000 people over here that all did the same thing and all saw the same results, maybe it's not science, but it's pretty close, right?
Yeah. What's fascinating is before all of this global trade, the dietary lifestyles were so simple and meat was such a prominent food item in practically every single civilization. And now it's just become a parade of hyper palatable foods. So it's insane how crazy we're going, what kind of direction we're going into. Do you have anything to add?
I do. There's entire companies whose job it is to produce flavors. A lot of people don't realize that there are flavor consultants, and they will produce these flavoring agents that are specifically designed to tickle the brain stem and get all your neurons all lit up. It's like I said with the apple, is that if something in nature is too delicious, it'll just get eaten out of existence. Which is why, we need all these pesticides and herbicides and, till the soil and get rid of all the bugs that are in it and fence these areas off because they're so palatable that nature will just completely ruin it. It needs to be that balance. But we can produce these things that will stimulate the brain to a level that, nature never would. And that's a little bit scary. It's like we're not prepared for that. And that's why I also hate this idea that, fat people are, weak-willed. They are gluttons. They are, stupid, or all they need to do is just eat less. And it's like, you don't say that to smokers. You don't say that to drug addicts. If you're lucky enough that your food centers don't trigger the same kind of addictive response that other substances might in you, just count yourself lucky. I definitely consider myself a recovering food addict. There are certain things that I just do not ever put in my mouth, even if I'm taking like a dietary break, because I know that getting off of it will be more difficult than it's worth. Some people don't. Some people just don't have that response. But, you got to recognize that, what we've been prepared for over the last few million years and what has been developed in the last, say, 25 years, you can short circuit these things and it can be very dangerous.
Yeah, and what's really disgusting and crazy and which really pisses me off is that the solution to practically so many, this is just anecdotal. Meat Heals is coming up and so many anecdotes are coming out. But if it's all true, then the solution to so many of these chronic conditions lies in $2.99 a pound in your grocery store. And here we are with 10,000 millions of other food items that cause more harm than any good. So we've pretty much chosen taste, cheap foods, and all this revolutionary, nonsensical science that is, dose dependent at the same time. And we've shoved it down people's throats, and we've caused one of the biggest self-genocide in human history. That's the big tragedy of our time.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that goes back to the advice that people are told. You know, I believe very firmly, and people will debate me on this, but I think that most people believe on some level, because they've been told for their entire life, that a vegan is what you want to aspire to be. And the only reason you are not a vegan is because you are not as strong-willed as they are. They are clearly the most healthy people. They are going to be, you know, they're going to live forever. They're never going to get cancer or heart attacks or whatever. And the only reason you are not vegan is because you don't have enough willpower to put down the cheeseburger and instead pick up the kale. And it's nonsense. It's taking away the vitality that a human being can have by pushing this unscientific religious dogma.
Yes, and I was at. Go ahead.
It caused us. I was going to say it caused us to fear fat. It caused us to fear, meat. It caused us to fear these things that we've been eating for, by some accounts. I mean, they can measure the nitrogen contents and stuff in human bones and proto-human bones going back, millions of years. Even Australopithecines and all these things. They were heavy meat eaters. We can verify this. We can look at their bones. We can say this thing grew up eating at least mostly meat, and maybe they found a potato or a cherry or something along the line, but they ate mostly meat. And all of a sudden, it never caused any problem until like the 1950s when people started having heart attacks, and people just believe that. So we're going to cut out all the fat and all the meat, and that should fix everything. And yet our health continues to get worse, but people still buy into this, and they believe they're doing the right thing when they're not. And it's so maddening. I've had people at my work that say, I've got a friend of mine, he got gout in his foot, and he's like, I'm going to go vegan to try to fix it. I'm standing back there like, oh my God, I can't even begin to this discussion with you that you're totally going the wrong way. But you got to let people do what they do. They've been indoctrinated. And, I believe very much the same things. Like I said, I tried veganism. Eventually I was, I didn't get so deep into it that it became part of my own personal identity, but I thought that was the right thing to do. And so many other people do.
Yeah.
People want to be healthy, and they've gotten so much bad science and so much bad advice and so many things twisted around by, government nutritional guidelines and, health gurus and, newspapers and magazines. And it's like, we need to just burn it all down and start from scratch, honestly.
Yeah, that's the sort of my approach or my thought processes a lot of the times. But at the same time, I look at some of the vegans and I realize, that's good intentions. These are not bad people, but they've been raised throughout their time to be, let's care for animals, let's circle back and be good. Which brings me to an interesting question: have you actually come across some reasonable folks who don't have this sort of militant approach towards veganism?
I have. I don't necessarily encounter them online, probably because those people wouldn't be online promoting veganism. They wouldn't have like a little stupid V in their name on their Twitter handle or whatever. But in my everyday life, yes, I have actually run into vegans who are reasonable people, and I think that they're misled. And what I mean is that these people, they're largely vegan because they want to reduce suffering in the world. I am, somebody who has endorsed a personal philosophy of nonviolence and reduction of suffering in my own personal life, and I understand that. I'm very empathetic to their feelings about that and of animal welfare and how do we make the world a better place and a more equitable place. But I think that these good intentions have been misdirected towards these positions that advocate political action or legislation in a direction that is not just harmful to the individual, but even harmful to the planet, harmful to the food supply, harmful to sustainability as a globe. And people need to see both sides of it and say, well, maybe, just maybe, there's another way of looking at that. Maybe not looking at human beings as somebody who's abusing animals, but as one animal and another animal working together. In that kind of integrative agriculture and the animal husbandry that human beings have been involved in for forever. Maybe looking at it as more of a circle than sort of as a pyramid is a more healthy way of looking at it, and understanding that the human beings and animals can coexist together, even if one serves as a food source for another. And I've read books on it, and it was one of the things that kind of for a while, it sort of was a lot of cognitive dissonance in my mind. It's like, I'm a nonviolent person, but why do I draw the line and say my own species? And, I wouldn't say draw the line at my own race, right? Why would I draw the line at my own species? What is the context there? How can I justify that? And that's something that took me a while to kind of come to as well. And I did by learning about real integrative agricultural practices. Look at the Vegetarian Myth by Lear Keith, which is a book I encourage everybody to read, especially people who are vegan or are very much sympathetic to the cause of animal rights. It's a great book. It breaks down a lot of the kind of relationship between human beings and animals and how we can have a world with less suffering while still eating a diet that is for the most human health and vitality.
Yeah. And I was, right now I'm agnostic relatively, but I was raised in a very Muslim culture. And over there, the philosophy was, this is not suffering, this is sacrifice. So they've got so you've got 1.6 or somewhat of a billion people on Earth who think of it that way. So one of the things we can get into is this philosophy of suffering. Let's delve into this rabbit hole if you don't mind, because we've covered the sustainability on our podcast. We've covered the science, athleticism. Let's get into suffering.
Okay, now I'm going to say right out, we can dismiss the notion of American-style factory farming. I do not endorse it. I don't think it's sustainable for the earth. I don't think it's fair to animals. So I'm going to just throw that right out the window. If anybody's going to say oh, you're supporting keeping these cute little piggies and cows in cages and getting whipped and getting diseases because they're sitting on their own shit. No, I don't. Okay, so I just want to establish that right now. Now, what people who are of the vegan persuasion, and even have not delved into the total vegan lifestyle, but they're at least sympathetic to it, they believe nature is Disney, right? They believe that everything's holding hands and singing and skipping along, and then the big bad human being comes in like Fern Gully, and it ruins nature, and it spills chemicals everywhere, and it subjugates life, and yada yada, and human beings are the source of all suffering. That is nonsense. That is not what actually happens. If you are a wild cow or proto-cow or whatever, oric or whatever they came from, you are probably going to stumble, break your leg, become immobile, and get eaten by ambush predators while you're still alive, probably through all the soft parts in your body. That is the most likely cause of the end of your life if you are cattle in the wild. That is a fact. Okay, or you're going to contract a disease and you're slowly going to die in the most painful way possible over the course of weeks or months. Or you're going to die in childbirth. This is nature. Nature is cruel. Nature has absolutely no sympathy for any creature, man or otherwise. Now, if you look at sustainability, like Joel Salatin style of sustainable agriculture, you have animals that are protected from predators. They are protected from disease. They receive medical care if they do become ill or injured. And the slaughter that does happen to them is done instantaneously. A bolt gun to the head. Some people would say, okay, it's brutal. And I can see why people would believe that that's brutal. But the animal doesn't even know it's happening to them. They lived a long, happy life where they were never hungry. They never suffered. They never had to worry about life or death illness. They had room to roam around. Like I said, I'm talking about exclusively grass-fed, free-range kind of agriculture. I'm not talking about factory farms. But they had a great long life. They reached maturity. They had the best life an animal could ever hope. This is first world level of animal raising. And then their life is extinguished instantaneously, and they become part of the food chain. Now, a cow is never going to land on the moon. It's never going to, cure cancer in another cow. It's never going to start a charity for another cow. All a cow can do is hope to live a long and healthy life and have its death be as quick and painless as possible. And properly done, that's exactly what agriculture does. For cows, for chickens, for pigs, for everything that human beings should thrive on, that's exactly the way that it is done. And on top of that, you're rebuilding the soil. You're rebuilding the bacterial cultures that keep soil healthy. You're doing everything that makes the planet healthy, makes human beings healthy, and makes animals happy. And I cannot disagree with that way of raising animals.
Yeah. And here's another part of suffering, which is somewhat ignored. Human suffering. When $1 in every $4 is spent in diabetes care, as far as medical stuff is concerned, and then you have so many people just limping their way around, getting their legs chopped off, and then you have so many like these companies that are being built around these ecosystems that are causing people to get even worse. It's this ping pong game between these pharmaceutical, food, health companies. Everybody's just playing with us humans. It sounds like it's conspiracy madness, but it's true to some extent.
It is, and it's entrenched money, and it takes literally an act of Congress to change these kind of like laws and things that are around pharmaceuticals and around food guidelines. But I saw an estimation that we're going to be spending $2 trillion by 2020. That's 2 years from now. $2 trillion on just treatments that are direct or periphery to diabetes care. Talking about insulin, everything from, insulin treatments, and metformin treatments, all the way up to, hacking limbs off and, extended hospital stays from infections and things like that. $2 trillion. Okay. If you total up every single dollar, federal, state, and local for every single program to help the poor and disadvantaged, you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about wellness or healthcare, welfare, education, everything, that's $2.6 trillion. So we're about to spend as much money as a country treating diabetes as we do for every single program, federal, state, and local, to help the poor. That is insane, and it's showing no sign of slowing down. And it's disgusting. It's horrible, especially when we look at the science coming out now that says what we would once call a fatal disease. You basically, you've got type 2 diabetes. Well, eventually you're going to get fat, sick, and your feet are going to fall off. Sorry, we'll try to mitigate that as best we can. We're saying that we can prevent it and even reverse it. And we've got so few of the major nationwide health authorities even acknowledging this, when we have, a number of physicians all over the country doing it in their own personal practices, seeing the reversals happen. You think, at least from a bean counting paperwork, money management perspective, they'd say, well, maybe we just look at this a little bit. And I hope it's going in that direction, but from what I can tell, it's not.
Yeah. We need to build from scratch, man. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
But so let's
not anarchy tomorrow, not anarchy later this afternoon, but anarchy now. Burn it all down.
like Peter Pollerson would say, today. The Illuminati revolution.
Yes, today.
So
Molotov cocktails right at the U.S. dietary guidelines.
That would be epic, wouldn't it? So here's another topic that I think we should delve a little bit about, and I think this addresses health. Is for example, this whole college culture where people are not able to share ideas. Everybody's feeling offended. I think. Yep. Do you want to delve into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so full disclosure, I would consider myself a libertarian anarchist. So that's sort of where I sit. And that's one of the kind of person who basically believes everybody should be free to do and say whatever they want as long as they don't hurt anybody else. Don't hurt people. Don't take their stuff. That's where I sit. Now, I grew up in Northern California. I went to school. In 2005 to 2008 was my college career, and it was before things really kind of took off. But I have to acknowledge that I didn't. I did, and I hope that most people would agree with this. They didn't arrive at their personal belief structure at birth, right? There was some kind of discourse and discussions and challenges that over their life eventually led to where they believe, and they don't believe what they believe lightly. Okay? I don't think that happens anymore. I think that that's a dangerous sort of bubble that we're putting people in, where they're not allowed to discuss ideas that are, maybe dangerous or are offensive or are, maybe countercultural. We need to, and I don't want to get into the whole, these people are snowflakes or whatever. It's both sides. People, they insulate themselves from other opinions. And I think that that's dangerous, because I basically arrived where I am in virtually every view that I have because somebody challenged me on something I had assumed before. And when you stop that from happening, you stop people from learning. It doesn't matter if it was my religious views or if it was my personal views, or my views on nutrition, my views on engineering. All these things, they have been challenged at one point or another. And I had to step back and go, wait a minute. Why do I believe what I believe? Do I believe it for good reasons? Maybe I should examine these things. And, eventually I'll realize that either, okay, maybe I was right, or maybe I had some kind of validity to it, or maybe the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah.
And that, by removing that and by saying that there are certain things you just simply don't talk about. Like I remember hearing this thing that like when these horrible shootings happened, people were allowed to talk about, I can't remember the way it was phrased, but they essentially weren't allowed to discuss directly in the classroom issues of gun control.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got my own views on that. And I invite people to challenge them, and that's fine. As long as we can, talk about these things respectively, not like you believe what you believe because you're stupid and you're an asshole. That's not really productive. But by saying you're not allowed to discuss these things, that's a very slippery slope. And that's the kind of thing that we have seen, and I don't want to be, too dramatic, but we've seen these things devolve into dystopias. We've seen these horrible things that basically like, these are, the Orwellian sort of nightmares of a thought crime. We're not there yet, but I mean, can you say we will never be? No, you can't say that. I mean, you take one step in front of another, and eventually you find yourself completely unable to discuss a topic or another, or legislation or an opinion. And that's dangerous. That is very dangerous.
And just to add a little bit more to your argument here, being raised in Pakistan, where I saw the 9/11 from the other side of the conflict, by the way, and one of the common themes over there is don't think about it. If you are feeling skeptic, you are not even allowed to think about it. Dissolve that thought. That would be sometimes the case. And that is how I'm starting to see some of the college campuses nowadays, or this is one of the things that I'm afraid of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you say that, okay, there is one opinion that is right, everybody else's is wrong, and anybody who believes the wrong opinion is that by extension a bad person, well, now you've dehumanized that person, because now that's not a person, that is a bad person. That's the bad guy. That person is, literally Hitler or whatever. I mean, it's very unproductive, and it goes from being just unproductive, shit flinging to being, having people's entire lives ruined. I'll give you just an example. Like there's this guy, Count Dankula. I don't know if you've stumbled across this yet, right?
Nope.
Have you stumbled across the whole Count Dankula saga? Okay. The Scottish guy, from all accounts I can tell, he's one of these like Howard Stern, intentionally inflammatory, comedians or whatever on YouTube. And he's an asshole. Like I don't think he'd even like fight me to say that he's an asshole. But I mean, what he did was, his girlfriend or wife, whoever he had a relationship with, had this pug dog that was like just disgustingly cute, and she wouldn't shut up about how cute it was. So, I heard a noise. What was that?
All good.
Okay. And so he thought, okay, what can I do to make this dog less cute? What's the least cute thing in the world? A Nazi. So he trained the dog to do a Nazi salute whenever he said Heil Hitler. It's tasteless. It's stupid, right? The fact that he did it, it's like, what are you doing? Stop. But he did it. And now he's going to jail. They're saying he committed a hate crime.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, he didn't hurt anybody. He didn't advocate for anybody to get hurt. He made a dog do a trick that was offensive for the sheer purpose of being offensive, because he doesn't like Nazis and finds Nazis to be not cute. I don't think anybody would necessarily disagree with that. But the fact that he's even talking about Nazis, he's a criminal. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. I'm all for punching Nazis. That's fine. But like to train your dog and then like, okay, now somebody's going to jail because of it. His life is going to be ruined because of that. Time out. We need to, kick him off of YouTube or, tell him you're a dick. I don't want to interact with you anymore. Whatever. And anybody who like believes like that or thinks like that, maybe they should be ostracized or whatever. But I mean, you can't ruin somebody's life for making a bad joke.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line at that point?
What's really interesting is this sort of double-edged sword behavior that can be found nowadays, where I lived 18 years in Pakistan, so I was exposed to a very different culture. And the trend is, let's accept everybody for who they are. But once you start to indulge with the people, you realize that there are always going to be certain barriers if you've been exposed for such a long time. And then those kind of people just want you to fix to a specific mindset. So you cannot deviate away from that no matter what or whatever. So for me as a businessman, I'm more focused on let's make a productive company. Let's help people become healthier. I'm not too worried about the formalities of how I project all my messaging. And then I get scrutinized. And some of those challenges are because, well, I wasn't exposed to a lot of these things and I'm trying. But a doctor is not going to be, he's going to be more focused on healing people rather than being in political debates. So that's what my point was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been lucky that a lot of people that I've known in my life that have disagreed with me, coming from both sides, really, they were, the kind of people who at least were intelligent enough to go into the debate and say, okay, let's unpack this. Let's talk about why you believe this and why this may or may not be the right case. And I was lucky to have these kind of people in my life who would be willing to engage with me. If you don't have those kind of people, you'll become, solidified or calcified in your belief system. And then it becomes an us versus them rather than recognizing that really, if we break it down, most people want the same thing. They just have very different ideas about how to achieve it. I mean, really, when you break it doesn't really matter what it is. We all want to be happy and healthy, and we all want a nice planet to live on, and we don't want to basically be bothered. We don't really want to bother anybody else. But the minutia of that and how to accomplish that, people have wildly different ideas about how that's done. And it doesn't matter if it's food, if it's culture, if it's music, it doesn't matter. People they form themselves into little camps, and I don't like that. I don't like camps. I don't like saying these people like this and I'm like this and those people are different, and except vegans.
So this brings me to an interesting question, which is, how do you deduce this intellectual or person in general I can engage with, or this person I just need to push them away?
I think the sort of the turning point there is basically if their opinion of me is based on one viewpoint I have, right? If they think they know everything about me because I am a meat eater. I've had people say that I am a meat eater, therefore I am a carnist, therefore I am evil. What do you say to somebody like that? There's no discussion to be had. That person will never contribute anything valuable to a conversation. They will go throughout their mediocre, unexamined life, and they'll die believing exactly what they believe now, unless some drastic thing happens to them. It's not worth engaging. But somebody could say, I'm trying to be healthier. I heard a lot about veganism. I'm going to try going vegan. And then I say, well, here's maybe some studies or some anecdotes or some evidence that says maybe this veganism thing is not the most optimal way for you to achieve your health goals. And they'll say, oh, okay, I'll look into that. That's the kind of person that you can engage with. Somebody who's willing to learn. The worst person is the person who thinks they already know everything. And that if you knew everything that they knew, you would believe exactly the same way they believe. Yeah. That is the worst person. And that person, like I said, they're going to be in their little cluster of people, and maybe they'll make contributions to their little cluster, but outside that cluster, they may as well not exist.
Yeah.
They are not going to contribute beyond their bubble.
Okay. So let's say if I'm a vegan, how do I engage with you?
If you're a what vegan?
If you're just a vegan, how should they, what would be their preferred, you've faced a lot of attacks from them sometimes or occasionally. I don't know the intricate details, but how can someone approach you and say, okay, it's fine, let's have a discussion. So what would be the correct dance between you or anybody else, or in general between people?
Is acknowledge that the other person knows something that you don't. Okay, and that's just kind of a healthy mindset to go into any kind of human interaction. Everybody I've ever talked to knows something I don't. That's just a fact. That's a fact of life, because I didn't live the same life they did. Therefore, they know something I don't. And I may be very well versed in, human nutrition, because I've made it sort of a study over the last 8 years, absorbing as much as I could from podcasts and books and things like that I find very interesting. But I can't call myself an expert on everything. I mean, just like we saw, Sean Baker's blood glucose numbers. They were kind of unusual. I was like, okay, well, what's going on here? And there's a lot of theories as far as what's going on there. I don't know. Maybe he really did give himself diabetes from eating steak all the time. I don't know. Is eating literally nothing but meat the healthiest thing one can possibly do? I don't know. And I'm open to any kind of, evidence, strong evidence that says that maybe what I'm doing is not optimal. Now, I've done a lot of different things for my health, and what I do now, which is, let's say 90, 95% animal products in my diet has worked very, very well. But if somebody says, well, maybe if you added this, or maybe you could try this, maybe you could supplement something over here, or you can add this, or you could subtract this from your diet, and here's some indication that this would be a benefit to you. Okay, why not? But if somebody says, you're wrong, you're always going to be wrong, you're the worst person in the world, then there's not a discussion. All it is, you're flinging shit over the fence and just, wherever it lands, it lands. It's like, that's not helpful. That's not a discussion. So if somebody was vegan and wanted to engage with me, I would be more than happy to explain why I believe what I believe, or if anybody who disagrees with me, and a lot of people disagree with me about a lot of things, but if they wanted to engage with me, I'm more than happy to explain why I believe what I believe, how I arrived at these conclusions, how I don't take these conclusions lightly, and I'll be more than happy to listen to somebody with a differing viewpoint and why they arrived where they arrived. And then the discussion can happen. And we can even, agree to disagree at the end of it, as long as we're being amicable and not saying that these belief systems are 100% of what comprises the human being I'm discussing with. Right?
Yeah. You got any good books?
Yeah, I got a few of them. Depends on what do you want to learn.
For me,
I try to read as much as I can.
For me, it's about becoming a good person. I mean, it's irrelevant to diet or nutrition. Choose whichever favorites you got.
I'll reiterate again, Lierre Keith's The Vegetarian Myth is a good kind of cross-examination of health and fitness, but also of ecology and social understanding and sympathy with other human beings. It's a good read, especially kind of knowing where she came from. She was a hardcore vegan for 20 years. If people don't know the story of Lierre Keith, hardcore vegan for 20 years, health deteriorated. The veganism was very much a part of who she was. And when she started sort of, examining the lifestyle and how vegetables are produced and what was happening to her health and how human metabolism works and how, a vegetable-based diet, what does it actually do to the planet? She changed her mind. And it's very brave to me to have somebody take something that's so much a part of who they are, examine it, and be able to change their viewpoint from it. That's a very, very powerful book. Okay. So I'll put that very much top of the list. Nutrition-wise, I think Big Fat Surprise by Untitled is brilliant. Being a good person.
Can be philosophy, can be anything. Recently, I've been intrigued by the Jordan Peterson book. That's been really fascinating, the 12 Rules to Life.
It's on my list. I haven't read it because it just seems like a lot of common sense to me. But I think Jordan Peterson is kind of maybe at least friendly to the sort of libertarian viewpoint. I don't know if he'd actually consider himself one, but he's one that sort of believes in self-sustenance, I guess. Standing up on one's own, taking responsibility for things, independence. I don't understand the backlash against him. Like that to me just blows my mind. It's like they make him sound like he's one of these alt-right monsters or whatever that's trying to burn society down. And it's like, no, really, he's just kind of like a motivational speaker with a background in psychology. I don't really see why people are all getting up in arms about it. But from what I've read about his books, it does seem like a good way to sort of like examine one's life and to move forward with it. I think it was a good book, and it's a controversial book. And can I say I recommend it?
Sure.
I'll say I'll recommend it because I think it's worth reading. I think it's worth reading with a skeptical mind, but I think it's worth reading just to kind of open one's mind. And it's called Defending the Undefendable, and the author's escaping. Maybe Walter Block. But it kind of goes through these sort of like pariahs of society, and these people who you think are the worst people in the world. You might, and I'm not saying I believe this, but I'm saying that society at large, say drug dealers, prostitutes, slumlords, robber barons, these villains, and sort of says, well, let's actually take a more examined look at these things and see the conditions that exist that allow these people to come into place, and were they actually serving a net positive or net negative for society in their context. And I thought that was a very good book. Some things, like I said, I still ended up finishing the book and disagreeing with his positions on it, but at the very least, it lets you sort of like take these things that maybe you have assumed are, very black and white, good and bad, and say, well, maybe there's, more of a gray area in there. And that's kind of a good way to at least segue into how do I examine a person that I may assume is bad for certain traits of their life and examine them more as an entire human being and examine them in context rather than this label that has been put on them either by myself or somebody else.
Exactly. And you've hit the nail right on top of the head. We have this narrative of a hero with 1,000 faces. We also have the narrative of a villain with 1,000 faces. We don't talk about the villain with 1,000 words behind him. So that's the thing that we need to understand. I think society grows by understanding the context, understanding what they did wrong, the choices they make, rather than just painting them as black or white. We live in this crazy sensationalist society where it's just a matter of buzzwords and quick gratification, which has just led to our downfall as a civilization. Yeah. So, yeah. I think people,
they're heavily incentivized to make things simple. And we live in a world where I think things have become very simple. And that's a good thing for the most part. I don't have to, go to the library or, to get information. I don't have to do anything really terribly difficult to, live my life, right? I get everything, in bite-sized chunks very easily. But at the same time, I think that makes everybody assume that everything can be obtained in a bite-sized kind of format.
Yeah.
And so you've got to have this double-edged sword here. So, we have a very fast-paced world. We have a world where, you sit down, you get in front of Reddit or whatever, and you look at, 40 different articles and 100 different cat pictures all within the span of, 20 minutes, and this rapid consumption, this lack of needing to work to obtain knowledge and entertainment. Yeah, like I said, it can kind of go both ways. It's a great thing. It's wonderful that you can learn anything you could ever want to do or see or be, but you expect everything to be easy at that point, or it's incentivized to expect things to be easy because so many things are so easy now. And being able to take a step back and examine yourself and examine those around you, that takes time and that takes a lot of effort. And that takes, a very scary thought that I might be wrong. I might have some kind of central part of my being that I have made part of my life and part of, I am Jim and I am a vegan, or I am Bill and I am, this political persuasion, or I believe this. And then when I really dig into it, I might find out that that's not really who I am. And that, then somebody has to recognize well, now who am I? What do I do? And that's scary,
Yeah.
But I think it's worth doing.
Do you have any specific topic you'd like to cover here with the mic in front of you?
One thing that I have been very interested in is the science and application of addiction. And I'm just going to give a little bit of background there. I've been very lucky. I didn't, I never developed any chemical dependencies. I'm not, despite my tweets, I'm not an alcoholic. I actually don't drink that much. And I've never gotten addicted to drugs or anything like that. But I do consider myself a food addict. And I think that addressing beyond just the nutrition, but also the psychological aspects of why people eat, and what certain foods do, of course, to that mental state. People eat when they're sad, or people eat when they're depressed. And just the story that I had that sort of, I think a lot of people will resonate with was, I'd lost a lot of weight. I got down to, at the time, it was my lowest weight as an adult. I was just below overweight for the first time since I think I was maybe 12. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. I know what to do. All you have to do is stop eating, bread and sugar and go to the gym. Why can't everybody do this? This is so easy. This is the best thing. Surely anybody can do this, right? Super easy. Best thing. And, but, outside of the health perspective, I had a lot of, just emotional trouble and, relationship issues at the time. And I was very, very overworked. And, I decided that, okay, now that I finally hit this goal of no longer being overweight, I'm going to go ahead and have what was my favorite treat from childhood. I'm going to have Oreos. Okay. And that triggered, all of these thoughts of childhood, I guess, coming back, and sent me down this wave whereupon over the course of about 4 or 5 weeks, I gained 30 pounds. And obviously I'm not doing that because I'm hungry. Nobody has that kind of actual hunger. This is talking about an addiction. It's treating a kind of, a mental trouble or, some kind of external factor with a drug, and that drug of choice was food. And even, over the course of this whole, ridiculous binge, it wasn't all just sugar. I mean, I ate Sean Baker levels of steak, after eating a bunch of, garbage food during the day, 4 or 5 pounds of steak at dinner, followed up by a quart of ice cream. And, it was insane. But when that happened, and I looked at, I was at the end of it, and I actually stepped on the scale and I saw how far I had fallen from where I was before. It suddenly made sense to me that it's more than just the food. People need to also examine their life and figure out why they feel the need to do activities that they are aware of are not moving them toward the goals that they determined were important in the first place. And that's a very open kind of like discussion, right? Like, but being able to examine like, why was I eating like this? I was eating like that because I was sad and I was angry. Address the sadness and the anger first, and put structures in place that allow that kind of emotional stability, and these kind of problems don't happen. And that's exactly what happened. I said, okay, I'm going to cut these toxic people out of my life. I'm going to get the other things on track and make sure and find reasons to be happy and to count my blessings and to do the things that I need to be happy for all the time that I'm not eating. And some people talk about it, some people don't, but it really, health and fitness isn't just the food and the exercise. There's a very strong mental component to it. And I think a lot of people that are at the point in their life and they're saying, why I seem to be doing everything right, my plate looks right, my gym schedule looks right, why am I still not where I want to be? That's the next step. Say, where is my headspace? Where is my emotional well-being? Where are my relationships at? And that's something I'd like to see more people talk about, because you see a lot of people that eat like garbage, but they're happy people, and they seem to actually be fairly healthy. And they wake up in the morning and they just bound out of bed and they go to work, and they eat their big bowl of oatmeal and raisins and they cookies and candy and everything else. But they seem like they're doing pretty good. And there's a lot to be said for having the rest of the headspace and everything else in order. Is it 10% of the puzzle? Is it 50% of the puzzle? Is it 90% of the puzzle? I don't know, but it's a significant portion. And I think that it's one that people want to mechanize everything and think that it's all just, gears and a clock, and it's all these things that you can manipulate by doing physical things and not worrying about your mental state. And I think that's kind of a very Western way of looking at things. You put this food on your plate, you take this pill, you lift this bar, and then everything falls in place without that kind of, meditative, background and the headspace and the relationships that are, peripheral to all that. Those are always there. Those are always around, regardless of what you're eating. I think that's important. I think that's very, very important.
Yes, and that is our message here at Keto Geek as well. Create good human beings. Because, speaking as a food company ourselves here, if we look at what we've done in the past in this industry, we've pursued cheap, delicious, convenient foods. We got them, but what else came with it? I think we both know what those things are. So if we're not going to build this boat as a whole, then just a bunch of timber here and there is not going to make a difference. Those biomarkers, those weights, none of that stuff is going to move. We need to be good.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we absolutely do.
All right.
We need to support each other. We need to bear when things are difficult, and we need to know when to ask for help. And that's one of the reasons I love this community. I mean, the low carb community. Some are very cultish about it. Some of the, especially the carnivore community, they can be very cultish about it. Basically like the anti-vegan. I'm not really cool about that either. People think, you eat a piece of broccoli, you're literally going to get cancer. It's like, just stop for a minute. Let's be a little bit more rational. But the rest of the community, where we support each other and we say, we celebrate our victories and we're there when things are hard, that's a beautiful thing. And I just absolutely love that. And I've purged the negativity as much as I can out of my life. And I've got people like you. I've got people like on my Twitter. I've got people on my Facebook. And we all support each other. And that's really what we should strive for.
Yeah, by the way, thank you so much for sharing that story about addiction. It really means a lot, and it probably means a lot more to some of the listeners that we have on our show who are facing challenges. Yep. You got some final last few things, by the way? Yeah.
I was going to say, there's a lot of people that know me now that didn't know me 10 years ago, and I'm perceived as somebody who knows a lot about health and who is a very healthy person, and they don't know this past that I've had about struggling with food and struggling with health and my weight and everything else like that. And I just want to use that as an example of, it doesn't matter who you're talking to, you don't know their whole story. Try to understand them as a whole human being. And if they won't give you the same courtesy, they can fuck off. So that's what I said. That's my final words there.
Yeah, I call that the platinum rule, not the golden rule.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, treat me with respect or fuck off. That's a good one.
It's a two-way relationship. So you have to ground yourself in reality of how we behave. So let's go to the final plugs then. How can people find you?
Right now, it's just on Twitter. I'm at Steak and Iron, all one word. I have a number of things I've written that are as yet unpublished, sort of thoughts and guides and things like that. Maybe you'll see them. There might be a blog, there might be a podcast in the future. But right now, hop on Twitter at Steak and Iron. Hit me up. I love I'm on there probably more than I should be, and we'll have some fun.
Sounds fantastic. I think you should start your own podcast.
You know what? It seems like a lot of fun. I know people have done it. It's a full-time job, that's for sure.
Yeah. But at the same time, what would happen is people like yourself who are very blunt and honest and grounded in reality, you guys can really just rip it out.
Absolutely. I have no doubt that I'd enjoy the heck out of it.
All right, Daniel. Thank you so much for being on the show. Looking forward to meeting you in person and maybe chatting. That would be pretty awesome.
Hey, you're not far. You're up in Napa, right?
Napa, California.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll find a way sometime. I'm sure of it.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right. It's been a pleasure. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the show. You can visit us at ketogeek.com to check out our premium keto-friendly and low-carb food products, including our infamous energy pods, made from the best ingredients we could find in the entire country. We also recommend signing up for our newsletter at ketogeek.com/signup, where you get exclusive discounts, rewards, product announcements, and the latest content we are working on. You also get a 10% discount on your entire order when you sign up. Go to ketogeek.com/signup to join the low-carb playground.